This is the Rebel HR Podcast, the podcast about all things innovation in the people space. I'm Kyle Rode. Let's start the show. Welcome back, Rebel HR community. Extremely excited for the conversation today. With us, we have Dr. Randy Ross. He is a renowned communicator, best-selling author of multiple books, Relationomics, Remarkable, and Fireproof Happiness. He has a new release coming out. The third edition of Remarkable is coming out here in April, available currently for pre-order. Randy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Kyle, it's a pleasure to be with you, man. Thanks.
Absolutely, we are thrilled to have you and to talk about all sorts of cool stuff related to human resources. Your background, you actually have some legitimacy in the HR sphere. You were a chief people officer back in the day as well, right?
That's right. I'm not sure how legitimate it is, but just don't dig too much into my background. We'll go with that.
I think it counts, man. I'm going to give it to you.
Okay, I'll take it.
We'll give you a freebie, whether you think it's legitimacy or not.
It's like a short plan. I'll take that.
Well, one of the questions I have, and I love to ask this question of authors. So what prompted you to write these books and to spend all of the time, energy, and sometimes heartburn in writing a book, multiple books around relationships, happiness, and essentially human behavior?
Well, interesting question. But the reason I did it actually was just to establish credibility. We actually started Remarkable. We came up with the idea in late 2007 and launched Remarkable in 2008. One of the questions sometimes it's asked is, what's the one thing you wish you had known, that you know now that you wish you'd known when you first started? And the answer for me would have been, I would have been grateful if anybody had just told us we were on the front end of a recession. That's what I wish I had known. So we launched Remarkable, literally in January 2008, and we had no idea what we were doing,
Sure.
In that I had this mistaken notion that if I built it, they would come. And, we built it and nobody came because it was a recession and nobody was looking to do any training or development of their people. The training budgets have been slashed, as you remember. And so I had plenty of time on my hands. And so I thought, well, maybe I just need to write a book and put all of our thoughts down and codify all these lessons that we had been teaching. And so that's really what we did. And books are a wonderful way. They're calling cards, and it establishes credibility and helps establish you as a subject matter expert, I suppose, if you have much to say. Mm-hmm. And really that's why I did it. And, that's actually when things began to take off, because I think people saw the message as being legitimate and beneficial.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. And what you just mentioned, I went right back there to like 2008, and it was like, I just remember like at one point I was supposed to hire 90 people, and then I was supposed to not hire anybody and effectively performance manage, right? It was like overnight. I'm like, oh, great.
Yeah, fun days, right?
Yeah. But yeah, it's funny. It's also funny to me, like stuff like that happens, and there's kind of this big recession question mark happening right now. And it seems like the first thing that we always do is we go and let's slash the training budget, right? Or let's find everything we can that has nothing to do with generating direct profit within the next quarter. And training seems to always get slashed, which to me is a big mistake. And if you look at the companies that are successful coming out of the recession, they usually aren't the ones that have slashed the budgets, right?
The best organizations, Kyle, are those that act in a counterintuitive sort of a way. Because when do you need to invest in your people the most? When they're stressed out. I mean, that's the time that you need to be providing additional resources and help that can help direct and guide them through challenging times. And so you're absolutely right. I don't understand that mentality. We want to save a buck, but in the process, we don't take care of our people the way we should.
Right. Yeah. And it's I think it's fascinating if you look at some of these case studies of these organizations that have been consistently successful. When there's a pause in the market or there's a recession, they're the ones that build themselves up to be stronger because they can essentially catch their breath is how I would describe it. So it's fascinating. So Okay, so I've got the stage set. You've got a little bit of time on your hands, maybe not the time you want on your hands, but you turned it into something remarkable. There you go.
I like that.
We'll tie that into like a dad joke pun thing there.
Let me slide that in.
So tell me about the book, and obviously you're releasing a third edition. What was the focus of the book, and ultimately, what do you want people to take away from Remarkable?
So the subtitle to the new release, Remarkable, underneath that, 3 things: engaging culture, stellar service, outrageous results. And that's what you can expect. It's a fun parable. It's an easy read. But what it does is it helps take principles of applied axiology and talk about how those can literally codify your culture and create an atmosphere of customer service that's extraordinary. It's remarkable. I mean, we define remarkable as you provide a service or a product and you do so in such a way that you blow people away, so that when they leave your presence, they have this irrepressible desire to talk about the difference that you've made while you were in their presence. And, when people are talking about you, when they're remarking about how your service or product has impacted them in a positive way, then you indeed have become remarkable. And so that's what the word means to us. And the whole book, through this storyline, this narrative, unfolds some principles of axiology that every organization could be enriched and empowered if they would apply.
All right. So I'm going to ask the question because I'm okay asking the dumb question. What is axiology? Can you help us understand what this definition is?
Yeah, absolutely. And don't feel uninformed or foolish, because most people have never heard of it. But
right.
I geek out on this stuff because I love philosophy and how it applies to human behavior. But axiology is a strain of philosophy that talks about values, value construct, and value creation. So for people who are always talking about, let's bring value, let's create value, let's add value to this endeavor, the challenge is most people don't know how to do that or what value really looks like. So axiology, the essence of axiology, and by the way, it goes all the way back to Socrates and Plato. But fast forward to the present, the modern father of axiology, if you're interested, is a fellow by the name of Dr. Robert Hartman, who passed away in 1970, but he was he was nominated for a Nobel Prize, but the Nobel Prize is not awarded posthumously, so he didn't receive it, but it was nominated the very year that he passed away for his work in this field. And axiology is the attempt to define and measure good, which to me is fascinating. And what his whole life was dedicated to was defining good and trying to describe and explain how good men and women could create movements of good within organizational life. And that's what those principles speak to, and how when they're applied, it can make a incredible difference in terms of tone, atmosphere, culture. It can literally completely transform the organization.
Wow. So it's really fascinating, and it's funny. I'm just sitting here like from an HR lens. It's like, how many times have they said, that how do we build our culture? What are your corporate values? How do you, measure performance? And so much of it does come back to, the basics. And most of us don't know what that means, like how to do that, right? Like I went to business school. I didn't get a philosophy degree. I don't,
right.
But I can Google, right? Like how to instill values in an organization. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm the right person to do it. So I would venture to guess that most of our listeners are probably in the same boat where, we're being asked to do things that maybe we don't fully understand these principles. So as we think about the subject matter that Remarkable helps us think through, what are some of the tenets of axiology that we can start to incorporate in our day-to-day work to help our organizations thrive?
Well, let me throw a couple of them at you. So the first principle of axiology is the what we call the maximum of creativity. And it just simply says that we're all designed to create value. In other words, we feel good when we do good. And creating value is not about just creating value for ourselves, but it's about creating value for others as well. It's this whole idea that, self-esteem is not enough. We've gone through great efforts to build people's self-esteem in fundamentally unsubstantial ways. But when we're talking about value creation, it's about self-worth, which is based upon this idea that you've done something worthwhile. You've contributed to society. Now, here's an interesting story to make this point. Dr. Hartman, you remember the name Abraham Maslow from Psychology 101?
Sure. Maslow's hierarchy, right?
There you go. And so the pinnacle of the hierarchy, the 5-tier hierarchy, is most people remember is self-actualization. Well, Dr. Hartman, the father of modern axiology, and Abraham Maslow both taught together at the University of Mexico in Cuernavaca. And one night they're sitting together over dinner, and Hartman turned to Maslow and he goes, "So Abe, tell me about this hierarchy of needs that you've created. Tell me all about that." And went through the long explanation of physiological needs and then security, love and belonging, esteem. And he finished up with self-actualization. Dr. Hartman looked at him and said, "So Abe, let me make sure I get this right. So self-actualization means that you have become all that you were meant to be. You've fulfilled your life potential. You're now self-actualized." And he goes, that's the pinnacle, right? And Abe goes, "Yeah, you got it. That's it, Robert." And he asked him a question, a two-word question that sent Abraham Maslow into a tailspin. He looked at him and he said this: "So if you become self-actualized, so what? So what good have you done? What dent have you made in the universe? What legacy have you created? What good have you done for humanity? So what? You become all that you were meant to be, but you're light. You just breathed our air and used our resources and you left the world no better than when you got here. So what?" It messed Maslow up. And if you do your research, Maslow went back to the drawing board and he recreated his tier. It's not 5 tiers. It's 8 tiers. And in between self-esteem and self-actualization, he added aesthetic needs and cognitive needs, but more importantly, above self-actualization, he added self-transcendence. And self-transcendence had a metaphysical connotation, but it really meant going beyond yourself to do good for others, to create a legacy, to give back to mankind, to leave the world a better place. It's all this idea of creating good. So the question that's posed from this first principle is, do you bring more value to the table than you take away? Simple question, but it's very profound in its implications because everybody in society is all about getting as much as they can for themselves, right?
Right.
So a simple question individually and organizationally is, do you bring more to the table than you take away? That's the first one, the principle of creativity. The second one, I hit the rest of them pretty quickly, but the second one is positivity, the maximum of positivity, which is just this idea that all the good you want in life is the byproduct of creating value for others. If you want to leave a positive wake in the world, then you have to contribute to making the world good. And it's kind of interesting because John Templeton used to say, happiness pursued eludes, but happiness given returns. The same thing is true when it comes to positivity or success. It's in giving it to others that it comes back to you. The third principle is sustainability. In order to continuously create value, you have to leverage your passion and your strengths to solve problems. There's a lot of talk, Kyle, in the world about passion. There's a lot of talk about strengths, but the essence is you got to combine the best of who you are for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to solve problems. Because the bigger the problem you find and solve, the more value you create. The more value you create, the more invaluable you become. And that's the principle of sustainability. And then lastly, the principle of responsibility, or the maximum of responsibility, just says that you have to act in a responsible manner to do what you've been called to do, to fulfill your potential and make a positive impact on others. So it has to do with accountability and responsibility.
We'll be back after a quick break.
And so used to having
everything in front of them right away, that we forget that innovation just takes time. I myself, I get frustrated too. Why? And you know, this is being one of my best friends is, hey, I talk to you all the time. Hey, man, I'm frustrated in the fact that I can't seem to just get there in the next day. But that's just not how these things work, right? Innovation needs to be planned out. It needs to be very methodical. And then when it finally hits, that's when it seems like to everyone else that it sort of just came out of nowhere. But to you, you know, the amount of dedication that it took over that time.
Yeah. So, if anybody, nobody can see the video, but I'm sitting here like taking notes, like I'm, like listening to a lecture, but,
Sorry,
you just blew everybody's mind because we got these
lecture.
5 hierarchy and needs. We got these down, like this is like HR 101. And now you're telling us there's 8. So, we're all going back to the drawing board.
Got to Google it. You got to Google it.
We got to Google it. By the way, I love the fact that story, you were using first name, like we're on a first name basis with Maslow. So that's but I think, what's fascinating to me is maybe the fact that we're challenging the paradigms of everything that we have really had ingrained in us, right? It's about thinking differently about how we define things. And then, ultimately I think about this in the context of HR, if we think in the context of value add, and how we add value as a human resources professional, it changes the context of how you approach the work that you do.
Oh, no doubt.
Right. Like, am I going to go update that policy so that, one incident that happened, once every 2,000 times gets corrected and never happens again? Or am I going to go focus on this employee relations issue where we've got a severe gap in, a positive culture at this location, right? Like, that's a pretty simple decision. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be our decision point, right? So,
yep. Well said.
Okay, so we're Googling Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Everybody's doing that right now. I think one of the other comments that you made that really stood out to me is the fact that, it's self-esteem is not enough, and that we have focused heavily on self-esteem needs, but it's been, you didn't use this word, but I think about it as like it's been kind of hollow, right? There's not been a lot of substance there. So as you look at human resources, I would argue that there's been a lot of hollow actions in our function as well, where we do a lot of talking about helping our employees find happiness or helping our employees add value or finding the right talent for the right job. But it's a lot harder to define finding, the actual value that somebody delivers, or the value that you deliver on a daily basis. And I think that's one of the big challenges that we continually see in our profession, which is, what's my worth? And I think that can be tough for us to kind of confront as a profession. So as a former HR guru, well, I'll use that term, or HR professional, whatever you want to use. How do you look at our profession from the context of the value that we create, and how can we reflect on that within our organizations and personally to make sure that we're not just focusing on self-esteem, but we're focusing on that self-worth piece?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very important that we help elevate people in their performance to feel proud of the work that they do. And we have what we call the remarkable trilogy of a great culture. And that trilogy is a place where people believe the best in each other. They want the best for each other. And so therefore they expect the best from each other. Those 3 things. We believe the best in each other. Now, a lot of people, a lot of HR professionals spend a lot of time trying to puff people up and let them know, we believe in you. We believe in you, the rah-rah cheerleading kind of stuff. And I think that's fine, but can't stop there. People need to know that we believe in them. That's trust, right? Trust is foundational for all relationships. But the second part is we want the best for you, which is connection and compassion. we've got your back. We're looking out for you. We have your best interest at heart. But then and only then can we apply accountability, which is therefore we're going to call the best out from you. And I think most organizations fail on this element of coaching people up the way they need to be. Yes, there has to be trust. Yes, there has to be connection. There also has to be that accountability piece, but you have to have all three. One of the things we've been really good at in the past as HR professionals is that accountability piece. But think about your own teenagers. You've got 3 kids. They're getting to that age where they're, going to start challenging and defying you. I hate to tell you, buddy, but your oldest one at 11 years old, you're on the verge of adolescence. It's going to get more challenging. And if you try to hold kids accountable before they believe that you love them and you believe in them and you want the best for them, you're going to incite rebellion. And a lot of times what we do in organizational circles is we fail to connect people's personal passion to corporate objectives in such a way that we are challenging them, number one, to make sure their values are solid, and number two, that their values align with those of the organization. And when we do that in the context of believing the best in, wanting the best for, and expecting the best from, I think we can coach people up to higher levels of performance.
I love the way that you articulated that. And it's, for the audiences, understanding. I've got an 11-year-old and, just last night, when I said, hey, can you put the phone down? I got that stare, right? So it's like, it's not full adolescence, but it's like, just like a little bit there, like a little spark of rebellion. And
you're seeing the inkling.
It's coming. And if my adolescence is any indication, it may be a bumpy ride, but I love the fact that, you tie this back to some of these really, what I would call like very basic principles, but just because they're simple doesn't mean they're easy, right? It's the trust, connection, compassion, and then you can drive accountability, right? And so often we're sitting here and, we're the ones that maybe don't understand the person, don't understand the context, maybe don't understand the business as well as we should. And we're trying to drive accountability. And it just doesn't work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Makes everybody miserable. So I'm curious. I'm curious to dig into some of the research on this a little bit. You talked about defining good, and one of your more recent books, The Fireproof Happiness, talks about happiness as well. Are these principles, do they underlie some of the research around, feeling good or being happy or driving that within a culture or society?
Absolutely. And all of our messaging is very tightly tied together and it builds progressively upon itself. But in the book, Fireproof Happiness, first of all, let me back up. I love Rebel Human Resources podcast because I love to shatter myths and mistaken beliefs about HR, functionality. But in Fireproof Happiness, one of the things we do is we establish through research the connection between hope and happiness. We know that happy people do better work. Here's the interesting part. Hopeful people are happier, they're healthier, they live longer, and they're more productive. Mm-hmm. And the research bears that out over and over and over again. So the question is, what's hope? Everybody agrees that hope is absolutely essential for the human spirit to thrive. But if you ask them to define hope, most people have a very fuzzy, non-workable definition of hope. Well, we define hope as a dynamic motivational system tied to inspirational goal setting. Now, maybe you've heard this said, probably heard it 1,000 times. Hope is not a strategy, right?
You just quoted my chief risk officer.
Let me tell you. I shadow that. Hope is your absolute best strategy.
I like it.
If you know what hope is and you know how to pursue it effectively. Because think about it this way, Kyle. Let's say that you're involved in any endeavor and the people that you're involved in that endeavor with are hopeless about reaching that objective. What's your success rate going to be?
Zip.
And so hope is absolutely the heart and soul of any strategy. But you have to understand what it is and you have to be able to apply it effectively. And so, we sort of reverse engineer, deconstruct hope, and then put it back together again in the book, Fireproof Happiness. And we talk about practical principles that can be applied to help your teams elevate their hope. Because to build resilience into an organization, you have to instill a sense of hope.
I love that. You hear that, Ron? Hope can be a strategy if you define it correctly.
That's right.
There's an asterisk there.
But it's your best strategy.
I love that. Yeah. And that's, I do joke the name of the podcast. It's a little bit oxymoronic, right? Because like, how many HRs do you know are actually rebels? But the reality is like, we do need to disrupt some of these systems, because if you look at some of the challenges that we're facing in corporate America and in our teams and in society in general, some of these systems aren't working. Right. So, we're using conventional knowledge to try to, lead organizations or build strategies or policies. And the reality is a lot of people are miserable.
Well, and remarkable is unconventional. Remarkable is not doing the usual. It's being unusual. Remarkable is not about being normal. It's about being abnormal. Remarkable means you go above and beyond. As a matter of fact, a great quote that I love by Robert Stevens. He was quoted in an Inc. magazine article, and he said this: advertising is a tax you pay for being unremarkable. And think about it. If you're remarkable, the people are talking about you. What's the best form of advertising? We all know it's word of mouth.
Yeah.
And I just love that.
I love that. Yeah. It's, that's good. I'm writing that one down. On that note, I think I would use the same argument for human resources, right? If you are status quo HR, you are absolutely going to pay a tax on, you're going to have more turnover. You're going to have to pay more in recruiting fees and all the other stuff that goes along with it, because people aren't going to want to stick around at a status quo company. You do need to be remarkable, especially right now, right? With just the talent market that we're facing right now. So I couldn't agree more. And you hit on, one of the, maybe the points of my career where, I had a light bulb moment, and that was, we can't just keep doing stuff the same way we've always been doing stuff for the last 40 years, because it's not working for everybody. And everybody is failing. So let's change it. Let's be a little bit different. Let's be notable. And in this case, it was in our community, and it worked. Right. And then word of mouth, and I didn't have to pay a bunch of recruiter fees anymore. So
absolutely. Because when you get to the point that you are remarkable, then you don't have to attract talent. You just select talent. They'll come to you.
Right.
Because people want to be a part of a remarkable organization.
Right.
People want to be a part of an organization that understands that people thrive in relationally rich environments. People are tired of toxic behavior. And when they find a community where their priorities, their passion, their values align with the organization, and they feel at home, they're invigorated by the work that they do, because they know it's making a difference.
Period, punctuation mark, end of we're gonna stop it right there. I am going to encourage everybody to, again, go check out the book Remarkable, Fireproof Happiness and Relationomics. Dr. Randy Ross, thank you so much. We are going to shift gears. We're going to go into the Rebel HR Flash Round. So we've been kind of tiptoeing around these questions, but I'm fascinated to hear your response. Question number 1: where does HR need to rebel?
In my mind, it's pretty simple. HR needs to move from regulation to inspiration. We become really great as HR professionals about producing policies and procedures and like you said, addressing that one-off bad behavior rather than creating an inspirational environment. And essentially what we've done is we've created a police state that goes around and catches people doing things wrong. And we need to reverse that, much like Ken Blanchard told us in the 1 Minute Manager years and years and years ago. We need to be walking around, catching people doing things right and creating a positive, inspirational environment. So we need to move from policies and procedures to paying attention to our people and taking care of our people, because if we take care of our people, the people will take care of the client.
I love it. From regulation to inspiration. Very well said. Has anybody told you that you've got a way with words? It's almost like you've written some books or something.
My wife tells me I use too many words.
No comment on that.
Yeah,
I am running a podcast, so the good news is I can say as many words as I want. All right, question number 2. Who should we be listening to?
You ready for this? Your people. Because here's the thing, the lost art of leadership, I think, is in asking good questions. And most leaders they don't ask.
Absolutely.
But if you ask the right questions, Kyle, and you listen intently, your people will tell you what they need.
Yeah.
If you ask the right questions and you listen intently, your clients will tell you what they need. If you ask the right questions and you listen intently, your spouse and your kids will tell you what they need to thrive. I think we need to start listening to our people, because if we don't listen to our people, they will tell us with their feet. And I think that's one reason we've got the revolving door of talent, is that we're not listening to our people and we're not meeting their needs.
Absolutely. And everybody wants to be heard, right?
Absolutely.
The human truth.
No doubt.
All right. Last question here. How can our listeners reach out, connect with you, and get their hands on the books?
Well, that's easy. Reaching out to me, you can look at my LinkedIn profile. It's Dr. Randy Ross. On my website is drrandyross.com. Just DR, no period, drrandyross.com. As far as getting your hands on the books, as you mentioned, Remarkable, the 3rd edition is coming out in April 2024. And so you can pre-order that right now by going to any of your favorite bookstores, wherever fine books are sold, and asking them to put one on order for you. And as soon as it comes out in April, you'll have it. The others are available in bookstores as well, or wherever you typically buy your favorite books. So, you can find us online. You can find us on Amazon. You can find us at our website.
Absolutely. And we will have links in the show notes. Open up your podcast player. Check it out. Dr. Randy Ross, amazing to have you on the show. Just some really, really wonderful content. And I would encourage everybody to pick up the books. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, this has been fun. I've enjoyed hanging out with you.
Likewise. All right. That does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.
Baby.